Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm Michael Bolden, the Dean of the Berkeley School of Journalism, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Before we get started, I have to acknowledge someone special who's in the audience. Actually, there are many special people in the audience, but I would be remiss. Hey, Deepa, I didn't see you over there. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention this person. Seated in the very back to my right is Tom Goldstein. Tom was Dean of the School of Journalism twice. So please give him a round of applause. And I also have to recognize we've got several members of our faculty who are in the audience. There's one person I want to call out in particular. That's Professor Bill Drummond, who's also here to the right, about midway back. Professor Drummond was recently promoted to Professor Above Scale. That is one of the highest honors you can have here at UC Berkeley, and he's the first Professor Above Scale for the School of Journalism. So let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to Northgate, our historic home here at the Berkeley School of Journalism. It's Homecoming 2025, and we're thrilled to see you. Go Bears. And I also welcome our community online. Some of us are alums or current students. Some of us are faculty or staff, parents or friends of the school. All of us, I hope, are believers in the importance and power of journalism. I started here just 2 months ago. I'm just the 8th permanent dean in our history. And it's my honor, it's the honor of my life, actually, to serve here in this capacity at the greatest public university in the world. Journalism is at an inflection point. It's a time of verbal and physical attacks on journalists here and around the world. Mis and disinformation are filling our media environment, and vast technological changes affecting how we deliver the news and how people receive it faster than many of us could have ever imagined. This is a time that calls for journalists and journalism to meet the moment. That's why I'm excited to be here today in conversation with my friend, a UC Berkeley class of '93 alum and a true innovator in journalism, Sara Catania. Sara is the president of the Solutions Journalism Network, a journalism nonprofit. She'll tell us what that means in a moment. She's worked for the LA Times and Reuters. She's written for Mother Jones and LA Weekly. She's led news teams at AOL and Patch, and she's been an executive at NBC LA. She's also taught reporting and writing to undergraduate and graduate students at USC. We first met when I was working for that other university down in Palo Alto that I won't mention, where Sara serves on the selection committee for the Knight Journalism Fellowships. Sara and I will have a brief conversation, and then we'll take questions from you, both here in person and those of you online. So the topic of our talk is building trust between journalists and communities. 2 days ago, the Gallup organization, which you'll all know from their famous polls, reported that trust in the media is at an all-time low. So Sara, I'll ask you, tell us what is solutions journalism and how can it help reverse that slide?
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here with all of you back here at beautiful Northgate Hall. Thank you so much, Michael, for inviting me. It is wonderful to be here. Tom Goldstein was the dean when I was a student here at Berkeley, and he is responsible for so many great innovations at the school that inspire me to this day. I know we're not going to get to everything that I want to talk about here, so I made a source sheet, and if you see those little flyers on the walls with a QR code, if you take a picture of that, you can get access to all the really cool stuff that I prepared for this, including a list of some of the awesome educators who were hired here by Tom Goldstein, including Marlon Riggs and Lydia Chavez, who are inspire me to this day. So I just want to put that out there before we jump in.
No, that's fine. Let's give them a round of applause,
Yeah.
everybody.
Okay, so the Solutions Journalism Network is a national nonprofit that is dedicated to supporting the journalism ecosystem to rebalance news so that it more accurately reflects the reality of the world, which is not all bad, really. There's a brilliant writer, her name is Amanda Ripley. She writes a lot about what's going on in the world and why there's so much disconnect. She wrote a recent story, and everything I refer to, don't worry, it's all linked in the thing, so you can read about it later in more detail. She wrote recently about the fact that a study released this summer showed that more people in the US believe that the murder rate has gone up in the US than understand that it has actually gone down quite significantly. Why is that? Why do people perceive, and this goes across, it is, you know, skews more toward older people and Republicans, but Democrats also think crime, you know, the murder rate is worse now than it was in 1990. Why? Tamara Keith, speak truth. It's local news. It's also the conflict economy, right? The peril economy, right? It's the dopamine hit. We are hardwired for negativity bias. What I love about what Amanda Ripley says is, so then do we just say, oh, well, people are hardwired for negativity bias, so let's just feed it? Or do we do something like this? We help people find something to help correct their vision so that they can see the world more clearly. It's incumbent upon us as journalists to do that. I feel that it's a deep ethical responsibility that we have as journalists to more accurately reflect reality. And solutions journalism is one of the ways to do that, and it's an important way to do that. So that's sort of like, in the largest sort of sense, what solutions journalism is and why it exists.
Well, so then how do we begin to attack this issue of trust through the lens of solutions journalism?
Oh, that small thing?
Just a little thing that you and I will solve sitting up here.
So let me take a step back from that for 1 second and observe that, yes, we all would like to know the answer. And just like leave here today knowing, okay, now we know what we need to do and we're going to do it and it's going to get better. In fact, there are many answers and we need to be doing all of them and we need to understand the complexity. We didn't wind up here today because one thing happened and that made everything bad. We wound up here today because of an accumulation of a lot of things over a long period of time. I was just talking to my friend, the author Nell Bernstein, before we came in here. Here she is over here. She just wrote an awesome book you should all read. But she was saying that she was instead of now reading the news in the morning, she reads history because the history helps her take comfort in the fact that things have been bad for a long time in a lot of places. Oh, that was private, sorry. But the way this relates to trust and the trust breakdown actually goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that why should people trust us if what we're telling them doesn't reflect what's actually true? And we need to do better. We need to take more responsibility for that. We need to hold ourselves accountable. We need to hold others accountable in our profession. And that's not all. The trust issue is not specific to journalism. So I think you all know who Reid Hoffman is. He just put out this open call. If you want $10 million, give me a proposal that's going to rebuild trust in institutions. So he put out this call to win $10 million. Just announced a couple days ago, there are 5 finalists. This could be anyone, anywhere doing anything. Of those 5, 2 are journalism. So this is very exciting. One is the American Journalism Project, which is a new model of thinking about how to create sustainable revenue models for local journalism, and the other is Cal Matters, which employs many alumni of Berkeley. But the point is that this trust issue is not specific to journalism. This is a breakdown of trust, period. And journalism has a very core fundamental role to play in that repair, and that's acknowledged and recognized widely. And it's going to take a lot of work from a lot of people doing a lot of things in order to make that happen.
Okay, but I'm not going to let you get away from the question because so we're journalists and people don't trust us, and we have to play a huge part in in helping to solve this. Where do we even begin? Because if people don't trust us, they're not going to listen to us. That's a huge roadblock, right, to even beginning to do the work. Where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, who is the us? What is journalism? If you think about where people are getting their information now, where are they going? The news world, the world of news and information is fractured. It's atomized, right? More and more people, certainly younger people, are getting their news and information from non-traditional places, from social media, from gaming platforms. People have always gotten information in lots of different ways. You get it from the other parent at your daycare center because, you just really need to know the thing about what's going on over there that no news outlet's going to give you. So this isn't to say that it's incumbent upon news outlets to give people every kind of information they need, but I think we all need to think differently about where and how people are getting information and why people are getting it the way that they're getting it. Why are individual content creators becoming such a magnet for people who want to get news and information? There's a young journalist, well, actually, she won't call herself a journalist, a young person who has expertise in finance. Her name is Kyla Scanlon. She posts every day on YouTube a 2-minute video explaining something about the financial state of the United States. She has a background in economics. These are excellent explainer videos. They are journalism. She also does interviews. She has a Substack. She's written a book. She's one person. She won't call herself a journalist. She was on a panel at Stanford talking about why she doesn't call herself a journalist. Why not? So there are lots of ways in which we need to interrogate our own definitions of who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what people are asking for. They're asking for truth, they're asking for authenticity, they're asking for humanity. Don't be the voice of the truth. Be a person with a point of view, and you're clear about that in what you're saying and how you're saying it. You don't try to hide behind a false sense of impartiality or lack of point of view. We've gotten better at that, but we have a long way to go.
So one of the things that some of my colleagues in the room will have heard me talk about is that I think journalists need to talk about love of community, about the tough love that they may have to administer when someone's hand is in the till. But we live in these places, we work in these places, our kids go to school in these places, and we most certainly are concerned with what happens in these places, right? So how do we get past this false sense of objectivity or distance that we seem to have created that makes people see us as the other, right? Not part of the neighborhoods, not part of the cities, not part of the places where people actually live?
I want to hear more about love and its connection to journalism and the humanity of journalists. But I'll take a stab at answering that in a kind of a personal way. When I was learning how to do journalism, my understanding was that you don't participate, you observe and report. And that was very important, because if you participated, that would sully your ability to objectively or somehow fairly communicate what you were observing. And, that was a really big mistake. And it's a mistake that we're still paying the consequences for, because what does that mean for my humanity as a person if I'm being taught to be an observer in the world and not a participant in the world? How does that affect my ability to have empathy and to understand what's actually really going on? So that has actually, I think, created a lot of problems for us as journalists. And in ways that I think people who are my age, I'm as old as the journalism school, by the way. I learned this today when I was on the website, and it said the journalism school was born in 1968. And I was like, oh, we're the same age. It's so cute. But if you are a person who has been doing this for a long time, as I have, you don't even know the ways in which that's kind of like dug into your psyche. So a few years ago, I live in LA. We have a huge problem of homelessness and unhoused people. Millions of stories have been written about the problem. I stopped reading those stories a long time ago. I see the headline, I'm like, I am not reading another story saying, yeah, it's still a problem today. Like, that is not helping me. Part of the problem is stories on effective responses, which is what solutions journalism does. You take a small slice, you look at a program that works, you amplify it, you hold power to account to replicate it and expand it. That's part of it. But the other part is, I'm a person, I live there. What can I do? What should I be doing? What is my responsibility in my community? So I joined the board of a permanent supportive housing organization in the city where I live, which is Glendale. It was weird for me. I was like, can I do this? Is it okay? Am I gonna get in trouble with like journalism if I do this? And like, of course not, but it's so deep in this idea of like, if you participate, you can't impartially like report on unhoused people, because that's maybe you'll say it's good that people are unhoused. I mean, it's just this bizarre, deeply embedded principle of journalism that I think has really caused a lot of harm.
So earlier in my career, I was an editor at the Washington Post, and one of the editors during my tenure famously refused to even register to vote because he said that compromised his objectivity. And I had grown up in the Deep South, where my parents had been part of the Jim Crow era, and people literally fought and died and were attacked for the right to vote. And I thought, how do I square that, right? The idea that if I'm a journalist, I can't even register to vote. So talk a little bit more about the personal connection we need to have with our communities and the humanity of journalism. I love the way you have been phrasing that. What does it mean to be a journalist and also to be deeply human?
Yeah, I don't know. But I think if we are willing to humble ourselves and look at what content creators are doing, they're showing us what it looks like. And I'm not talking about influencers who are trying to sell you expensive stuff. I'm talking about, and there is an entire realm of younger people who talk to me and you and everyone else, and they say, look, I'm a person, I'm here, this is what I know, this is what I've learned, this is how it affects me, this is how it affects you, this is my special kind of expertise, and this is something you should know. They don't take it away from themselves. They don't remove themselves from that part of it. One thing that we know that we have seen over and over again that research shows is that people want news and information about their communities. They want news that's useful and helpful to them. And they want to know about things that actually have an impact. And that really is the path that we need to be on. And those things are very hard to do. And they're not the same for everyone. You have to know your community, you have to understand, you have to talk to people, you have to sit with them, you have to engage with them to understand what they actually want to know. If you tell people what they want to know, like this is what you should know, this is what I think you should know, that might get you to a certain point, but it's not going to get you across that bridge into a place where you're listening, people feel connected, like what you're telling them is something that they can trust and understand.
So, I mean, what you're describing, this can't be a one-off, right? I mean, if you're a news organization, this has to be a practice that you live continually. How do you get news organizations, many who are embedded in practices of the past, to make that shift?
Yeah, I mean, I had a great conversation this morning. I came by earlier and sat with, I think it was like 10 or 11 students here at Berkeley Journalism. Just said, what do you want to know about? What's on your mind? And, one of the things that they asked me was that very thing, like, how do you take this approach or an approach that will connect people and bring it into any news outlet? And I think part of the answer is happening now, and we're seeing it in newsrooms that are, well, out of desperation, looking for what can they do to recapture their audience and community. So one example would be at Solutions Journalism Network, our model is really a model that's based on training and supporting newsrooms, independent journalists, to understand how to bring an approach into their news organization that is grounded in effective responses, but also incorporates building trust and engagement. So one of our core areas of focus is on democracy, right? How do you cover democracy, right? Every news outlet knows how to cover an election, right? Or thinks they do, right? Because it's horse race coverage. It's like, who's winning? Who's winning today? Who said what? Who said what bad thing about the other person? And that's one way to do it. And another way to do it is to really think about, okay, what do people need to know in this community to really understand what's at stake, right? And that includes components around engagement. So we work with an organization called Trusting News. We bring them in and partner with them. And trust, right? So Hearken, which is another organization that really helps news organizations understand how to listen. So it is multifaceted. It isn't a one-off. It's news organizations that either out of, it's probably a combination of, we would like to survive, we would like to serve our community, we would like to make some money, we would like to be able to pay our reporters. What can we do that actually serves the community and also pays the bills? And an approach that incorporates all these components can do that. But it is a process. Nothing is going to be fixed in 5 minutes. There's no quick or easy answer.
So I think I first heard of solutions journalism because of a project that was underway maybe, I think, at the Seattle Times around education. So this probably was many years ago. So I want to name some names, right? I mean, so who's doing it well, especially among legacy publications who might be making the transition? What are the examples that you point to? Because journalists, we like to see that something's successful, then we'll go mimic that. So who do you point to tell people, okay, look over here and do what they're doing, and you can have some success?
Yeah, there are lots of different models, and again, it isn't a one-size-fits-all because there are so many different kinds of news outlets. There are for-profits, nonprofits, community outlets, special interest outlets. So David Bornstein and Tina Rosenberg, who are two of the founders of the Solutions Journalism Network, had a column in the New York Times for many years called Fixes. And it was a column because they were friends with the person who ran the opinion section of the New York Times. It was a reported story that ran regularly about an effective response to a known problem. And it ran for many years. I think it just wound down last year. But that's a great model for for a news outlet that supported a solutions journalism regular feature all the time. Is the New York Times doing great solutions journalism all the time? No, of course not. But it has existed there, and there was a platform for it for many years. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Okay, I don't have the New York Times link in my QR code document, but I can add that to the Fixes column if y'all want to see it. But one that I do have in there that is fantastic, that I highly recommend, was done by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And it was like a 20-part big project on gun violence and the murder rate in the state of Wisconsin. And what's brilliant about this is that it is a beautiful example of everything we've just been talking about, listening to community, reflecting back the true stories of what this violence is about, who's involved, what gun owners are doing and not doing to support a community that is not the victim of gun violence. It's not objective, but it is multifaceted and reflective of so many different perspectives in the community. It points to effective responses, and the response that the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel has received for this series is incredible. They have been featured on very conservative podcasts. They have been embraced by people who consider themselves, very big gun control supporters. So it has captured and reflected the truth in the community in all of its complexity in ways that were very well received at a time of such great polarization in this country. How did they do that? What are the forensics of that kind of story that we can all learn from and take back to every single newsroom to do stories that way?
Well, so let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because you're talking about polarization as part of what you just described, and we know we're surrounded by extreme polarization, and the lack of trust is one of the elements, of course, that's present there. How can solutions journalism, even more deeper, try to help us bridge those divides, bridge that difference?
Yeah, so I mentioned this brilliant writer at the beginning. Her name is Amanda Ripley, and several years ago, she wrote a wonderful piece called Complicating the Narrative. And she asked the question, what if journalists took some lessons from social scientists and really thought about the way we talk to people, not to highlight their differences, but to look for the points of connection and understanding? And that approach has since become, she's created an entire organization called Good Conflict. And at the Solutions Journalism Network, we've incorporated the principles of complicating the narrative into everything that we teach, so that when we work with journalists in newsrooms who are interested in incorporating solutions journalism into their work, we talk to them from the very beginning about how are you framing the problem? How are you approaching people when you're asking them questions? Are you approaching them in a way that is assuming polarization and fueling it? Or are you approaching them with true curiosity and coming from a place of listening and understanding? And it's very different. It's a very different way of reporting a story. I mean, I have been a breaking news reporter, and if I'm going out to cover a story, I already know what the story is. I just need to fill in some information, and then I file the story, right? I know what that's like. This is not that. This is like going in with true curiosity and really trying to understand the complexity and then reflect that in your reporting.
So let's flip it around. So this is a community-based approach. We have many people in the audience who aren't journalists, who are members of the Berkeley community, who see things happening around them and wonder about how they can get involved, what they should be doing. What's their role in solutions journalism? Can they even initiate it? Do they reach out? What happens? How do we do that?
So your question is, how do people in communities get more connected to the making of the news or the news gathering process in their communities in ways that center community and the needs of communities?
Yes, you're so much better than I am.
Well, so, okay, what I just did there, in case you were wondering about what I was saying about complicating the narratives, that was something I learned, which is you hear someone ask you something and you're like, I think I know what this is, but let me repeat it back to them to make sure that I understood it. Journalists never do that. You're just like, give me my quote. Okay, I'm gone, you know. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. Okay, so start thinking about your questions because we're almost done here and I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Well, I'll go back to the example of this, what's going on in my community in Glendale, where we have a big problem with unhoused people, which everyone does, and the board that I serve on. I'm the first journalist who's ever served on this board, and the first question they asked me when they were considering whether they would let me was, well, are you going to write bad things about us? And I was sad about the question, but not surprised. Like, of course you're asking me that. And I said, well, I don't think, is there something you want to tell me? And, you know, I've been on this board now for a couple of years, and I think they still don't quite know what to make of me. Like, why are you here, and when are you going to write something bad about us? But no, I think the thing is that I don't think that it's the responsibility of the non-journalists to come and find the journalists and tell us what, you know, we should be doing. It's our responsibility to go to the people in our communities and in any community where we're interested, and we need to do the heavy lifting. That's our job, not theirs. I will say, and I know this is a little bit of an aside, but I've talked to a couple of people who came who are parents of students who are at Berkeley, not in the journalism school, but came because, you know, they were drawn to the topic. You know, please tell me something hopeful about the world. One of whom, Naz, where are you? Naz, does anyone here know about Marry Me Chicken? Has anyone heard of Marry Me Chicken? Naz is the maker of the Marry Me Chicken recipe. And I told her, this is the New York Times. For people who don't know what that is.
So you're going to add that link?
I am adding the link. It's an incredible recipe in the New York Times cooking app that went viral. But what I told Naz is like, thank you for coming. You give me hope, because that recipe is a very hopeful part of my life.
Of course, we've been talking about this mostly in a U.S. context, but many Berkeley journalism students are international. And I know that there must be tons of examples in international localities about solutions journalism. Talk about that, right? Because
that is so important. So the Solutions Journalism Network is U.S. based, but the enthusiasm for solutions journalism is global. And in fact, there is a lot less skepticism about solutions journalism outside the U.S. We've trained 80,000 journalists worldwide, and I don't remember these numbers, but they're all on our website. Over 100 countries, and whenever we lead a training, we get so many people, and these are done on Zoom, 3 o'clock in the morning, and some of these trainings, if we have a training program where we certify people to become trainers, because our model is not like everyone has to come to the Solutions Journalism Network because we're the experts. No, our model is we want you to get everything you need to take this, do it in your place, do it yourself, set up your own shop, and run this wherever you are in the world. And whenever we do one of these trainings to teach people how to do this, this is very intensive. It's many hours, and they come at 3 in the morning for many days and spend like 5 hours on Zoom at a time to learn how to do this wherever they are in the world. Because people in places everywhere, especially, actually, honestly, places that have huge challenges, want an approach that they can use to tell people something that is hopeful, that is meaningful, but that isn't fluffy, that is real, that is rigorous, that holds people to account, and that points to real evidence of what's working and insights that can help them expand those responses. So this is happening all over the world. A couple of examples: in the Amazon, there's an outlet called Vox Amazonia, run by Danielle Nardine, that is incredible and that has taken beautiful stories from that community and amplified them in incredible ways. I had another example, but I can't, that I was going to just rattle off here as if I just keep all this stuff in my head so easily. Oh yes, Ukraine. There is a wonderful news outlet there called Rubrika, and they are adamant that using a solutions journalism approach is essential to the future of Ukraine, and so they do these kinds of stories all the time. We also have outlets in Kenya and Nigeria, Nigeria Health Watch and Science Africa. Science is a great place for solutions journalism. There is so much rich material there, climate coverage all around the world. People are tired of hearing that we're, at the end. We want to know, how do we move forward? What are the ways to make this world a place that we can live into the future?
Oh, that's great. So we just have a couple of minutes before we're going to turn to you all for questions. And I want to ask one question that's really, it's a journalism question, but then it's not. So you're president of the Solutions Journalism Network. You have led all kinds of organizations in different types of roles. And I guess 3 or 4 months ago, you and I had a conversation about leadership that I'm now remembering. And I don't even know that, I don't think I knew I was going to be dean at that time. What does it mean to be a leader in this moment, and to try to guide people through this moment and all that's happening, not just in journalism, but sort of being the face and the vision and the person who helps execute things for an organization, whether it's journalism or not?
Well, aren't you going to tell me the answer to that, Michael? Humility, acknowledging failure and learning from failure, and being so clear that we all have a lot to learn. Supporting people, staying true to the core values of what really matters, which is, we need a free press in order to have a functioning democracy. So what will that take? What does it look like? And just checking your ego every minute of every day. Am I doing this because it's good for me, or am I doing this because it's good for journalism?
It's funny because I've had to get used to people calling me Dean. And when I first started, I'm just Michael, right? But I think you're right, leading with humility and empathy, and being inspiring, frankly, giving people a sense of what they're a part of and what we are a part of all together, as humans, I think is important.
Yeah, and I feel like, always be learning, and just everyone can be your teacher. When you invited me to come and do this, I was really excited about it. But what I was most excited about was sitting with students this morning and having coffee and hearing each of them talk about, I really wanted to know, why are you here? What brought you here? And these are smart people who have made a big decision in their life, many of whom have come from something else and feel like this is where they can make it really happen in the world and do something meaningful. And I find that very humbling and gratifying and inspiring. And it just helps me understand my own place, which is to support them in making those changes.
Yeah, it's the best part of my day when I get to spend time wandering around the courtyard asking students what they're interested in and what they're seeing and doing. So now we're going to turn to you and ask questions, and we will have people who will be circulating with microphones. So as An comes up to you, let's go.
I want to first thank you for your humanity that you bring to journalism in all the ways that it seems you're doing with your project. I was wondering if there's a way to kind of counter the norms that you were talking about. That if they ever had value in journalism, they may not anymore. So to counter more norms that distinguish journalism from citizen.
Yeah. Can you say who you are?
Daniel Burke-Harris, graduate of class 22.
Oh, wonderful. What are you doing now, Daniel?
I'm working in project management.
We need more project management. Thank you for doing that. So your question is, can we do a better job of separating, this difference between like the journalist as like this pedestal thing and just like people who know stuff?
Not just people who know stuff, but people who have an emotional response to what's going on in the world and want to portray what is going on in the world with a moral, emotional response.
Yeah. So I think what you're describing, what it brings up for me is the content creator model, right? Because this is individuals who have, often will have a specific area that they have expertise in, and you're saying an emotional response, but like they have, they have something they want to say. A moral response, yeah. And I think we are starting to make space for that in journalism. There are two entities that have emerged recently, one called Project C and the other called News Creator Corps, that are creating sort of like an infrastructure and a place for people like that to get some grounding in some core journalistic principles, which are really important, but that also enable them to maintain that individual voice and perspective.
Thank you.
We have an online question that I could maybe go out with. So this is from Beverly. Are there examples of solutions journalism in local TV news? To do it right, wouldn't it need to be a dedicated beat? These days, most organizations want multimedia journalists who do 3 jobs, but have barely time to breathe.
Yeah, okay. So local broadcast news is so important. I worked at the NBC station in Los Angeles for 5 years. My job was to run the digital team, and this was in the early 2010s, and no one really knew what that meant or where it was headed. And so this idea of the multimedia journalist who has to do everything, that was just starting to emerge at that point. And I know that I have seen firsthand how challenging it is to fit all that into the expectations of a local news broadcast. It's very, very, very hard. Where solutions journalism can fit into that is, and I've been at these news meetings every morning where it's like, okay, so that thing that happened, that breaking news thing that happened on Monday, it's Thursday. We still want to cover that, but everybody's kind of looking at their feet because they've already explored all the angles of how bad that thing was. And so that's the moment, Beverly, when you can pop up and say, so yeah, there was that terrible homeless encampment story from Monday, and we've covered it from all the angles of all the terrible parts of that. What if we did a story today that looked at what this other city did in response to a similar problem and how they were able to make it better? And then you call that station, you get some of the footage they already have, you repurpose it, you get your producer to package it. Most of it's already done. You do your stand-up, you do a couple interviews, and you've got a story. So there are ways to do it. I'm not trying to minimize the challenges because you do have 14 jobs, but there are ways to do it.
Hi, I'm back here. Tyke Hendricks with KQED Public Radio. I'm J School class of 97. And want to just say I'm a big fan of solutions journalism and the idea of complicating narratives. And this school has shaped me and continues to shape me in many ways. And nice to be in the room with folks who I think are working on, these kinds of issues with a lot of skill and goodwill. And I guess I want to go back to the question of trust, because I think there's plenty that we can reflect on as journalists about how we can do our job better to improve, regain, sustain trust from our audiences. But I feel like we're operating in a larger context where there are forces in our society that are trying to smash trust in journalism through, promulgating false stories, and indeed smash trust in institutions like our democratic systems and the rule of law and so forth. And so I would just posit that we have a big problem to solve, but it's not entirely of our making, and that we're in a slightly different environment in the last 6 to 9 months that is creating an urgency to how we do this. And I guess I'd put the question to both of you of just sort of how do we navigate that?
Well, we won't solve it. But no, I mean, I think that there are a couple of different things that have to happen, right? First of all, we need to acknowledge, as journalists, that we need help, right? I think that this is an effort that requires people of goodwill, no matter who you are or what you're doing, to be engaged in what's essentially a battle against disinformation and misinformation. We need more journalism and more journalists. And I think that those people will come from places like Berkeley Journalism, but they will also come from places like All Saints Episcopal Church, and they will come from the community center that's down here in South Berkeley. They'll come from various places, and I think we as journalists have to acknowledge that we can't do it alone, that we have to be facilitators and conveners and bring people together in the community to help wage this battle, because you're exactly right. We have lots of bad actors in the space who are intentionally filling the media and information ecosystem with all kinds of noise. And some of it is just an attempt to obscure other things, and some of it is an attempt to actually undermine democracy. So journalists, we have to realize we can't do it alone. We have to find ways to connect with people across difference in our communities. We have to be humble, to go back to something that Sara was saying, and engage the fight, right? And if we don't do that, we're going to lose. But I think by training more journalists, by getting more people involved, by speaking to the urgency of the moment with passion and dignity, and a realistic view of what's at stake, we can actually start to make a difference.
I might stand up just because I love seeing all your faces. I'm Emily Raguso. I graduated from here in '06, so almost 20 years ago, and basically never left, which was what Bill Drummond told me would happen. 3 years ago, I launched my own site here, the Berkeley Scanner, and it's sort of a creator model, although I did it kind of before that word became a buzzword. But I had been reporting here, and so I did have a lot of community trust, which I think has helped make it successful. And I feel that, the education I got here at the J School really gave me pretty much all the skills I needed on top of the, newsroom experience to do what I needed to do, to be responsible, be accurate. But I think one thing that's missing, and again, going back to this trust piece, is, and Sara kind of mentioned how we were trained back in the day to we are the outside observer. But I think one part of our job really has to be being responsive to the community. Like, we can't all have an ombudsman. And one complaint I hear about journalism often from community members is, there's a problem in the story. I tried to write someone in the newsroom, I couldn't reach anyone. And so I think part of the training for the next generation has to be, we as journalists need to take responsibility and engage when people write to us and communicate with us, but that's not really a journalism hat. So I'm curious how the J School sees that piece of it with like the next generation. Is it, how do you teach that? Because most of us don't get into this to be the front of it. We just want to write the story, or anyway. You have thoughts.
Before you answer that from the J School perspective, can I share? Thank you, Emily. It's so good to see you. And I'm going to have to follow up with you about being an OG content creator before it was a thing, because that'll be great to just learn from all the stuff that you've been doing as a trailblazer in this area. And I want to mention another trailblazer in this area. Can I use like a profanity on this, or is that not okay? It's in the name of this newsletter. It's what the just happened today. Matt Kaiser. Yeah. So he started this newsletter, I think, right after the first Trump administration launched. And it's going strong. It's just a guy writing a newsletter summarizing what happened today. But the way it relates to your question, Emily, is the accountability to community part, right? You're like, people just put stuff out, and then like if somebody wants to get in touch with them and be like, hey, what about this? And that was wrong. And it's just kind of like it goes into the void. So he's got a great model for that. He's very accountable. And I think this is something we can learn from creator journalists. It's a two-way conversation. And that's a piece that has historically been really missing, is people feel very connected in a two-way conversation. So he will periodically publish the reasons people unsubscribe. I mean, talk about humility, right? Talk about like, I'm just going to show you why people are not subscribing to my newsletter anymore. I mean, so the people who then read that, who are his subscribers, are like, wow, you really trust us, and we trust you because you're being vulnerable and you're showing us why people aren't reading you anymore. So I think that goes to your point. It's not the answer to your question, but it's an example of where things are headed and models that we can learn from.
Well, and we should be learning from them. So here at Berkeley, we are excellent in teaching people to craft stories. Doesn't matter the medium. You want beautiful documentaries, wonderful narratives, awesome photos. We do a fantastic job of that. There are other things, frankly, that we don't do as well. When we think about how you put a story out into the world and all of the thought and care around audience and creating feedback loops, well, that's journalism too. And so one of the things we have to be doing here at Berkeley Journalism, and we are going to do at Berkeley Journalism in partnership with the faculty and others here, is how can we augment what we're teaching the next generation of news leaders so that they can be more complete journalists? Because I don't want Berkeley journalism graduates to be just great storytellers. I think Berkeley journalism graduates should be the people who are leading every news organization in America with all of the principles that we know need to be engaged in, who are doing it with humility, who are creating successful feedback loops, who are helping to create new products that are helping to turn the business model around. frankly, those are all things that need to be embedded into some of what we're doing here at Berkeley Journalism. And the opportunity that I see here for us to do it is one of the reasons why I'm here.
Oh, thank you very much. My name is Cecil, and I didn't graduate from the School of Journalism here, but I did graduate from Berkeley with a degree in oral traditions from Alan Dundas. I hope there's someone who still remembers Alan. But the problem is that when I began to teach at African American folklore, I would give these great stories to students to read, and they would come back with puzzled looks on their faces. And this was because it's difficult to read African American folk tales by African Americans themselves because they were never taught literacy. And that problem remains because when you have Chat GPT, it does not pick up anything that was not written. And much of African American culture, from where I come from in North Carolina, and where Michael, if you don't mind my saying so, comes from is it Alabama, right?
Mobile, Alabama, the deepest of the deep south.
So we have such a culture that's left out because the African American vernacular is not recorded. It wasn't recorded purposely by the slave owners because that would do what they claim that is going to be done with artificial intelligence that are going to take your jobs, but in the case of Africans, it would also kill you. Witness Nat Turner, who was literate. But the point I want to make is that do we make any provisions for this lapse in literacy, which is applicable to our culture today? Should we not place some attention to the fact that we have a culture that has not been written down, but is still very vibrant, very, very vibrant? So my students will look at me with a puzzle, but once we began to use ChatGPT to put it into standard English, they say, aha, that's what my daddy was talking about. And then if you make a visual story from that, you find an image appears as if there was a hidden story encoded by these very Africans, which now we probably can evolve. I know it's a long question, and I'm a little bit not doing it service, but I think there's something to be said and done about this lost language that we have among us. Thank you.
Cecil, thank you for your question. Can I ask you if can you keep the mic for a sec, because I wanna ask you, is part of what you are sharing that you think that AI is helpful in capturing some of this information and you see an opportunity there and that you want to see more of that?
I'm very glad you asked that question because, in fact, I use AI to evolve a character, a man, a great poet named George Moses Horton, who lived in during slavery. In fact, he lived almost 190 years, and he wrote great poems. That is to say, he recited them, and someone wrote them down. Well, I was able to use the AI to bring his voice back and an image of him. And recently, Google and Gemini published a podcast on my lectures at UC Berkeley and at Stanford. They put them all together, and well, when I read them, I thought someone was actually speaking, but they were agents. But I was so pleased that they put together both of the lectures where my colleagues failed to do so. I mean, so I think, yes, there is, it's called Resurrecting Voices, Text, Poetry, and the Legacy of George Moses Horton. And you can look it up, and I'm very pleased that I was able to use the technology to bring forth a great poet who, because of the system of literacy, was not able to express himself in his own lifetime, but yet we can use technology to do that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. we don't have time. I know we're over time, but I appreciate ending on this note because I think that there are opportunities that for AI to be a very meaningful tool that can help us capture, clarify, and understand our own history and culture better, not to mention the news. So thank you for sharing that.
And let's thank Sara Catania for joining us here today.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, we appreciate your being here. We appreciate your attention. I think this will be also available online on our YouTube channel. So look for that link. And I urge you to join us here again at Berkeley Journalism for all of the events we have. Thank you for coming out.